enlightenment and dark matter are related. And the only reason they're related for this concept is in how we understand them. So if we imagine that this line here represents the receiving substance, and we're just going to call it substance, for light. So we're going to say light is coming in here. This is light. So let's begin with enlightenment, the concept of enlightenment. So while we're talking about visible light here, the same principles apply to all light. So if we say that light is approaching substance, okay? Now, when light, all the spiritual texts in the world kind of say the same thing, and that is that all the light in the universe is right before your very eyes. All the things you need to see and be aware of are right under your very nose. And I said, well, that's great, thanks very much, but why are we not experiencing it en masse? Why are we not, managing to share this much more consciously and freely and educate each other into perceiving it if it's so fundamentally there? Well, it's all to do with the science of enlightenment. So when light is approaching a substance, so in this instance, when we're talking about enlightenment, we're talking about the substance of your mind, the substance of your feelings. So when we're having spiritual or enlightened experiences, it's because our mind has been able to receive some of that light and we've been able to interpret it and process it. So how does that come about? Let's have a look. So light is approaching substance, and 4 things happen in different degrees. The first thing that happens is some of the light, well, it's not in any order really, so some of the light passes right through, Some of the light is reflected. Some of it is refracted, which means it bounces off at an odd angle, and some of it is absorbed. Here. So that's absorbed. Now, this applies to all things. So some of you may be familiar with the idea that grass is not green, it is every colour except green. Wood is not brown, it's every colour except brown, because it's absorbing all of the other colours in the spectrum except for the one which we see, which is the reflection and the refraction. It's a very interesting meditation to pay attention to the fact that every single thing that we see is merely reflection. It's the glare, it's the trick of the light, it's what bounces off the objects and substance around us. Now what determines how much of each of these things happens? So sometimes some is always reflected, some is always refracted, some is always passed through, and some is always absorbed. There are 2 things which determine which happens. One is the vibratory rate of the receiving substance. The vibratory rate. If the vibratory rate of the substance is too high or too low, then the light will pass right through or bounce off. The other thing is, this is very important, the state of organisation. The state of organisation. So, if the receiving substance is randomly organised or disorganised, the light will pass right through, reflect or refract. It won't be absorbed. An example of light passing through and refracting, a good example of that is windows. So in windows, the molecular state of organisation is quite random, so the light can pass right through. What's happening to us in our enlightenment is that we're changing our vibratory rate and our state of organisation of the bodies of our mind and emotions, or the substance of our mind and emotions, so it can receive higher light, so it can absorb higher light. Normally, we will have temporary alignments, which is a temporary state of organisation in things like meditation, dance, lovemaking, or even when we surrender to a pleasant walk. During these things, we can have a temporary shift in these things that allow us to have enlightened experiences. The general process of enlightenment is exactly the same though. Now, a lot of people might like to think that their state of organisation, their vibratory rate is very high, but the evidence of their living enlightenment says the opposite. Which is, well, actually, if that was the case, you'd be absorbing a lot more light all the time in your conscious mind. The reality is, though, our culture and our society seek to have us engage in indulgences and practices which keep our vibratory rate low, which is lots of lust-based sexual activity or indulgent substances. And the other thing it does is it likes to have us thinking about lots of distracting things. So our culture will have us thinking about as many distracted things as it possibly can. making us think about issues all over the world that we can do nothing about, and make us think about many supposedly important aspects of society and culture which are really completely unimportant. But what that does is it leaves us with randomly organised mind and emotions. So we're scattered, we're incoherent in a way in our emotional makeup and our mental makeup, so that we can't actually absorb any of this higher light. What's brilliant is one of the simplest things that can change both of these in one go is the use of sound work and mantra, which is why it can be such an effective gateway into meditation. That would be a different subject. I just invite you to try that though. The science of cymatics, let me write that up for you. Cymatics is the science of what happens when sound changes vibratory rate and state of organisation. And this happens to all substance and all matter. And I just invite you to investigate that a bit further. But I wanted to use this video to have a little poke at some of my scientific brothers and sisters out there who spend a lot of their time in labs and not a lot of time out in the world. And I'd like to have a word with them about this dark matter concept. Let's talk about dark matter. Okay, so dark matter, our very, very clever lab-based brothers and sisters have been telling us, make up a massive portion of the universe, like 98% or 95%, I can't remember what it is. It's some ludicrously massive proportion of the universe is this dark matter. And they're like, well, where is it? How are we going to find it? Where is all the dark matter? Well, I really am biting my tongue not to use offensive terms of, intellectual degradation to my brothers and sisters here, because it's absolutely obvious. Every single scientific discovery that we have had is all based on observations of the reflection of light. They're all based on a trick of the light where all we're seeing is in the visible light spectrum. Now, I don't know how many of you know it, but the visible light spectrum makes up 1/1000th of 1% of all light in the electromagnetic spectrum. 1/1000th of 1%. 1/1000th of 1%. Every single conclusion we've made about the world is based on 1/1000th of 1%. That is an infinitesimal amount of substance to base conclusions about the whole on. And I find it ludicrous that we're still in that situation. If we return to this diagram of light bouncing towards a substance, then what we'll actually find is the dark matter is all the matter that isn't reflecting light or refracting it. The dark matter is the bit which is absorbing the light. So actually, all the substance of the universe is here, it's just dark. That's the point. And if I cut into substance, I'm still only seeing the surface reflection. So it's not like I can cut into something and expect to see the dark matter. That's not how it works. Because every time I expose it to visible light, I'm caught up in the glare of reflection again. This is where the Toltecs used to engage a lot of their practices, especially meditative ones and all the rest of it, at night. Because they would say not only is what they would call the veil thinner, it's not about the veil, it's about the glare. The glare of reflection and refraction is less at night, so it allows us to awaken some of our other senses, which actually allows us to pick up other forms of light in the universe. But anyway, that was all I wanted to cover, was enlightenment being the state of organisation and vibratory rate, and dark matter being all the stuff that's absorbed.